What's good, yo? Welcome back to the Playmaker's Corner podcast. I'm your host for today, Simon Villanos, aka Coach V here, and this is your 2026 Women's College Flag Football Week 7 rankings and recognitions episode. Obviously, on this one, we're going to talk about some of the great performances from around the country here in Week 7. And by the way, Week 7 we are categorizing as March 23rd to March 29th. And then we are going to talk about rankings, which, a lot of movement here. There's some big games won and lost this last week here. So movement all over the place, some reintroductions of some teams. So we'll talk about that. My reasons, the rankers' reasons, all that great stuff. And then before we leave, we are also going to talk about end of the year award races. That is something that we will be, like I said, we'll talk about it at the end of the episode. So let me just go ahead and save that for then. But without further ado, let's just go ahead and hop right into it. Alrighty, now let's go ahead and talk about Playmaker of the Week. This goes to the most impactful performance from Week 7, voted on and chosen by us here at the Playmakers Corner, myself, Cody, and Gino. And per usual, so many great performances. That comes with so many great programs that are balling out. And as some of these games have big implications as far as the postseason goes. And so we have narrowed it down to a couple players here. Let's go ahead and start with the quarterbacks per usual. We have two who were just playing at a really high level that I want to talk about. We have Gianna Reyes of St. Francis here, 351 passing yards, 4 touchdowns, 1 pick, 21 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown in a win against Campbellsville, versus Life in another win, 209 passing yards, 4 touchdowns, 55 yards, and then versus Cumberland in another win, 222 yards, 3 touchdowns, did throw 4 picks, but had 85 rushing yards, and also got the win in an undefeated Week 7 where St. Francis got some key wins to keep their NAI Invitational hopes alive. So she is obviously in consideration, for Playmaker of the Week. We also consider Gianna Visco of Gallaudet here versus Howard, 125 passing yards, 5 touchdowns, 40 rushing yards, and a rushing touchdown in a big-time win, versus Penn State Harrisburg, who was second in the conference here. They needed this head-to-head. She threw for 246 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception, 73 rushing yards, and a rushing touchdown in a win that went ahead and put Gallaudet firmly in front of them. And then versus Karen, another team who is near the top of the United East Conference, 261 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, 54 rushing yards, and a rushing touchdown in yet another win as they go 3-0, earning some key wins here in the United East for Gallaudet to go ahead and take control. So definitely somebody that we had to consider. We also were considering 2 non-quarterbacks, some 2 skill players here. Starting with Aaliyah Wood, played in 3 games last week and got 3 big wins here. 9 receptions, 113 yards, and the hat trick, 3 touchdowns versus Southwestern. Versus William Woods, 13 receptions, 98 yards, and 2 receiving touchdowns. And then the big one right here, she helped get Kansas Wesleyan a big win over Ottawa with an 8 reception, 93 receiving yard, 1 touchdown, and 2 interceptions on defense type of game for them to, I believe they only won by 1 point against Ottawa, but that is a massive win for them to make things interesting in the KCAC, as we may have the tightest race for the top of the KCAC here in the regular season, maybe ever. And so she was a big time contributor to that in that win. And then last but not least, Harmony Walker of St. Francis. Yes, the teammate of Gianna Reyes. She went off this weekend versus Campbellsville. 14 receptions, 169 receiving yards, and a receiving touchdown. Versus Life in an upset win there. 7 receptions, 84 yards, and a receiving touchdown. And then versus Cumberland, 7 receptions, 83 yards, and a receiving touchdown, as I believe she was the lead receiver for them in all 3 games. So there you go. Those are the 4 finalists for Week 7 Playmaker of the Week, but as you know, there can only be one, and we are going to go with a familiar name here. We're going with Aaliyah Wood of Kansas Wesleyan with her big-time performances against Southwestern, William Woods, and most importantly, Ottawa. The Ottawa win was absolutely massive. You know, in big games, you rely on your star to make the plays that they're supposed to make, and some, and she did exactly that. You know, the margins were razor thin in that game, and she helped Kansas Wesleyan find a way to go get it done and make things extremely interesting for the first time, maybe ever, in the KCAC as far as women's college flag football goes. So shout out to Leah Wood, your Week 7 Playmaker of the Week. Alrighty, now let's go ahead and talk about the fantasy point leaders from Week 7. Yes, you heard that correctly. We take the stats that are provided and we calculate it using ESPN Standard and obviously PPR to figure out who made the biggest impact statistically in the games that they played this weekend. So we're going to do a total fantasy points earned, which, you know, there are a lot of teams that played multiple games, 3, 4, 5 games even this last week here. So obviously some of those players will dominate. And then we're also going to do, you know, a most points in a game deal as well. But unlike the total points, that will not be separated by skill players and quarterbacks. So just keep that in mind. All right, now let's go ahead and start with the non-quarterbacks, though. These are the players with the most fantasy points from Week 7, starting with Addison Cadwell of Wingate versus Ferrum, 15 rushing yards, 8 receptions, 75 yards for 23 points. Versus Milligan, 4 receptions for 5 yards and a touchdown for 10.5 points. And then versus Mars Hill, 10 receptions, 108 yards and 3 touchdowns for 38.8 points for a grand total of 71.8 to go ahead and start our top 10. At number 9 is Gwen Carter out of Emmanuel, 8 receptions, 152 yards, and 2 receiving touchdowns for 36.2 points. Versus Chowan, 5 receptions, 35 yards, and a touchdown for 14.5. Versus Mount Olive, 7 receptions, 72 yards, and 2 touchdowns for 26.2 points. At number 8 is Harmony Walker of St. Francis versus Campbellsville, 14 receptions, 169 yards, 1 touchdown for 36.9 points. Versus Live, 7 receptions, 84 yards, 1 receiving touchdown for 21.4 points. And then versus Cumberland, 7 receptions, 83 yards, and a touchdown for 21.3 points and a total of 79.6. At number 7 is Natalia Hernandez de Leon of Lee McRae versus Milligan, 5 receptions, 37 yards, and a touchdown, good for 14.7 points. Versus Mars Hill, 6 receptions, 87 yards, and 3 receiving touchdowns for 32.7 points. And then versus Mount St. Mary, 6 receptions, 95 yards, and 3 receiving touchdowns for 33.5 points. At number 6 is Annabelle Hott of Mount St. Mary's. Played a number of games here. I don't think she scored or recorded any stats against Ferrum here. But the rest, versus Mount Olive, 2 receptions, 15 yards for 3.5. Versus Barton, 7 receptions, 39 yards, and an interception caught for 12.9. Versus Mars Hill, 39 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns, 9 receptions, 58 receiving yards, 3 receiving touchdowns, and also caught 2 interceptions for 50.36. Versus Lee McRae, 6 receptions for 46 for 10.6. Versus King, 3 for 28 and a touchdown for 11.9 for a total of 89.26 points. At 5 is Gianna Brown of Emmanuel versus Barton, 8 receptions, 92 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception for 29.2 points. Versus Chowan, 7 receptions, 80 yards, 2 receiving touchdowns for 27 points. And then versus Mount Olive, 10 receptions, 115 yards, 2 touchdowns for 33.5 points. At number 4 is Avalon Luxalferman of Warder, 8 receptions, 66 yards, versus Life for 14.6 points. Versus Reinhardt, 8 receptions, 59 yards, and 2 touchdowns for 25.9 points. Versus Alabama State, 9 receptions, 108 yards, 4 touchdowns for 43.8. And then versus Thomas, 7 for 37 for 10.7. And a total of 95 flat points here. Good enough for number 4 amongst offensive skill players. At number 3 is Aaliyah Wood of Kansas Wesleyan. Against Southwestern, 9 receptions, 113 yards, and 3 touchdowns for 38.3. Versus Ottawa, 8 receptions, 93 yards, 1 touchdown, also caught 2 interceptions for 27.3. And then versus William Woods, 13 receptions, 98 yards, and 2 touchdowns for 34.8. At number 2 is Marley Hyde of Cumberland versus Lindsey Wilson, 10 receptions and 74 yards for 17.4. Versus Wittenberg, 8 receptions, 138 yards, 3 touchdowns for 40.8. Versus Life, 6 receptions, 73 yards, and a touchdown for 19.3. Versus Siena Heights, 4 receptions and 24 yards for 6.4. And then last but not least, versus St. Francis, 9 receptions, 86 yards, and a touchdown for 23.6, and a total of 107.5 points. And then at number 1, I believe this might be the first time she's at number 1 on the non-quarterback list here, but it is Jessica Finley of Warner. 7 receptions, 100 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception caught against Life for 31 points. Versus Reinhardt, 12 receptions, 119 yards, 2 touchdowns for 35.94. Versus Alabama State, 9 receptions, 124 yards, 4 touchdowns for 45.4. And then versus Thomas, 13 receptions, 124 yards, 4 touchdowns, also caught a pick for 51.4, and a total of 163.74 points here in week 7. I want to say that might be the most ever scored by a non-quarterback in a single week. So there you go there. Speaking of quarterbacks, let's go ahead and talk about them and who scored the most fantasy points here in week 7, starting with Gianna Reyes of St. Francis. 351 yards, 4 touchdowns, a pick thrown, but 21 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown versus Campbellsville for 44.14. Versus Life, 209 passing yards, 4 touchdowns, and 55 rushing yards for 37.86. Versus Cumberland, 222 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, did throw 4 picks, but also had 85 rushing yards, which helps that out a whole bunch, for 27.38 points, and a total of 109.38. At number 9 is Shahiro Owada of Kansas Wesleyan, 283 yards, 5 touchdowns, and 11 rushing yards versus Southwestern for 42.42 points. Versus Ottawa, 374 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 9 rushing yards for 33.86 points. And then versus William Woods, 255 yards, 5 touchdowns, did throw 2 picks, but also have 36 rushing yards, which kind of sets that off for 39.8 points. And then a total of 116.08. At number 8 is Gianna Visco of Gallaudet versus Howard, 125 passing yards, 5 passing touchdowns, and 40 rushing yards for a rushing touchdown for 45 points. Versus Penn State Harrisburg, 246 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception thrown, 73 rushing yards, and a rushing touchdown for 39.14 points. And then versus Cairn, 261 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns, 51 rushing yards, and a rushing touchdown for 33.84 points, and a grand total of 117.98. At number 7 is Mackenzie Hicks of Lise McRae versus Milligan, 206 yards and a touchdown for 14.4 points. Versus Morris Hill, 323 passing yards and 9 passing touchdowns for 66.92 points. And then versus Mount St. Mary's, 213 passing yards, 5 passing touchdowns, and an interception thrown, but also 25 rushing yards for 39.02 points. And by the way, that's a grand total of 120.18 points. Almost forgot that part. Now at 6 is Madison Woodard of Cumberland, 222 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 pick thrown, and 6 rushing yards, along with the rushing touchdown for 25.48 points scored against Lindsey Wilson. Versus Wittenberg, 268 yards, 7 touchdowns, and 1 pick thrown for 50.72. Versus Life, 234 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns, 5 rushing yards for 21.86 points. Then versus Siena Heights, 191 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, did throw 4 picks and had -9 rushing yards for 10.74 points. And then versus St. Francis, 208 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 pick, and 6 rushing yards for 18.92 points for a grand total of 127.72 points. Now entering our top 5 here, we have Anna Anderson of Ottawa, 243 passing yards, 5 touchdowns, 33 yards versus St. Mary for 43.02 points. versus Midland, 320 yards, 6 passing touchdowns, and 21 rushing yards, plus a rushing touchdown for 56.9 points. And then against Kansas Wesleyan, 361 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 picks, and 15 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown for 29.94 points. At number 4 is Payson Shreve of Ferrum versus Wingate, 300 yards and 3 touchdowns to 1 pick for 28 points. Versus Mount St. Mary's, 216 passing yards, 3 passing touchdowns, and 21 rushing yards for 28.7 points. And then versus King, 379 passing yards, 4 touchdowns, 1 pick, but 49 rushing yards and 3 rushing touchdowns for 60.06 points and a total of 137.8 points. At number 3 is a familiar face here in Amaya Pablo of Lindsey Wilson versus Cumberland, 275 yards, 4 touchdowns to 3 picks for 35.5 points. Versus Siena Heights, 267 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, 43 rushing yards, and a rushing touchdown for 38.98 points. Versus Wittenberg, 273 passing yards, 5 passing touchdowns, 1 pick, and 65 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown for 51.42 points. And then versus Life, 188 passing yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions, and 46 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown for 20.12 points for a grand total of 147.02 points. At number 2 is Lillian Stevenson of Emmanuel versus Barden, 362 passing yards, 4 touchdowns, 2 picks for 4.48 points. Versus Chowan, 246 passing yards, 7 touchdowns, and 2 picks for 39 rushing yards for 51.74 points. And then versus Mount Olive, 320 passing yards, 7 touchdowns, 1 rushing touchdown, and 1 receiving touchdown for 10 yards. Goes for 68.8 points for a total of 155.02 points. But back at number 1 is Catherine Hutchinson of Warner versus Life, 321 yards, 5 touchdowns, 1 pick down, and 5 rushing yards for 41.34 points. Versus Reinhardt, 348 yards, 6 touchdowns, 1 pick, 14 rushing yards for 49.32 points. Versus Alabama State, 463 passing yards, 12 passing touchdowns, and 5 rushing yards for 91.02 points. And then versus Thomas, 288 passing yards, 6 passing touchdowns for 47.52 points for a total of 229.2 points. Now, we are going to go ahead and get into the individual fantasy points here. The games, most points scored in a single game here from week 7. Let's go ahead and start at number 10. It's Madison Woodard's performance versus Wittenberg for Cumberland. 268 yards, 7 touchdowns, 1 pick for 50.72 points. At number 9 is Jessica Finley versus Thomas. 13 receptions, 124 yards, and 4 touchdowns, plus a pick caught for 51.4 points. Versus, and actually we have a tie there, so I guess tied at 8 or 9, whatever you decide, is Lillian Stevenson of Emmanuel versus Chowan. 246 passing yards, 7 passing touchdowns, and 39 rushing yards for 51.74 points. And my bad, not a tie, because she is ahead by 0.3. So there you go. I saw the number at the end. My bad. At number 7, though, is Anna Anderson of Ottawa versus Midland. 320 passing yards, 6 passing touchdowns, no picks, and 21 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown for 56.9 points. At 6 is Payson Shreve versus King. 379 passing yards, 4 passing touchdowns, 1 pick, 49 rushing yards, and 3 rushing touchdowns for 60.06 points. At number 5 is Destiny Lockett of Thomas versus Weber. 310 passing yards, 6 passing touchdowns, 49 rushing yards, and a rushing touchdown, plus caught an interception on defense for 61.3 points. At number 4 is Mackenzie Hicks of Lise McRae versus Mars Hill. 323 passing yards and 9 passing touchdowns for 66.92 points. At number 3 is Lillian Stevenson of Emmanuel versus Mount Olive here. 320 passing yards, 7 passing touchdowns, a rushing touchdown, and a 10-yard receiving touchdown for 68.8 points. At number 2 is Alexis Pabon of Heston, who had 341 passing yards, 7 passing touchdowns, and 46 rushing yards and 2 rushing touchdowns versus Bethel for 72.24 points. And at number 1 is Catherine Hutchinson of Warner versus Alabama State here. 463 passing yards, 12 passing touchdowns, and 5 rushing yards for 91.02 points. Alrighty, let's do a quick PMC Fantasy Football League update here. I got last again. I did score the second most points ever with 483 points. I'm just going to go down the line here. Amaya Pablo, 147.02 points. Shahira Owada, 116.08 points. Krista Quinn, 59.6 points. Yvonne Brussel, 54.1 points. Saren Merritt, 47.8 points. Riley Balser, 33 points. And Haley Witherspoon, 26.2 points. But it was just not quite enough there. There were some teams who had a lot of games, a lot more than usual. So there's that, and then we had some small underperformances here. Cody is a solid second place as well. I believe the 532 points scored here is actually the most Cody has scored all season, but unfortunately falling to second here. Catherine Hutchinson really carrying 229 points. Ava Wallace, 44 points. Aaliyah Wood, 100 points. Alyssa Linkus, 58 points. Cadence Wormers, 39 points. 39 points. Omariah Gordon, 25.6 points, and then Ashley Clam 35 points for a total of 532.24 points. But still, second place is Gino goes ahead and gets the tiebreaker this week with another big performance. I believe the second most ever scored this season. The first most was him. But at quarterback, Anna Anderson, 129.86 points. Bridget Kaiser, 105.38 points. And then you have the Warner receivers who are back. Anna Vincenzini, 40.5 points. Avalon Lux Offerman, 95 points. And then Jessica Finley, 163.74 points here, which is absolutely massive. We also had Ashton Weirley, 38.52 points, and Valerie Angebada of Barton College, 44.5 points, for a total of 617.5 points as Gino goes ahead and gets the win. As of right now, there are no drops or ads. We will probably update that next week here and go from there. So there you go, just a quick update. Alrighty, let's go ahead and talk about rankings here. These are updated, well, as of March 31st. That is when I'm recording this, but we're not including games from the 30th or 31st. Obviously, just updated, including all the games from the 23rd to the 29th here. And, we got some movement for sure. It was a big weekend for a lot of teams here. I know the postseason is coming up here, and so there's some big postseason implications, which I'll touch on as we go through these rankings. So let's go ahead and talk about the ones from last week here. In case you don't know how we do our rankings, myself and the other rankers, we each get to rank individual teams, make our own individual list, 1 through 25. If anybody of us rank a team at 1, they get 25 points. 2, 24, 3, 23, and so on and so on. All of us, we have different opinions, different biases, right? Which is great. I think that's what pretty much balances us out in a way here. And, our PMC rankings are made up of all of those biases. And so some of us may have other teams getting more points, and then those same programs might be scoring less, depending on where we rank them. And so I add up all those points. That's how I average it out. And then the teams with the most points, are closer to the top. And so you will see in some of the reasons that I list here, because some of our rankers did list those reasons, that, some of them have different teams ranked in different spots. That is their personal rankings. Our PMC rankings is the total average of all of that. So just keep that in mind here. But last week, we had a couple teams that were just outside, a number of them just outside. Penn State, Harrisburg, Emmanuel, Thomas, Lisa McRae, and Midland were all just outside. And then at 25 was Aurora, 24 Ventura, 23 Cypress, tied at 21 was Gallaudet and Saddleback, 20 Immaculata, 19 Huntington, 18 Wingate, 17 Hope, tied at 15 was Barton College and Nevada State. And remember, if they have the same amount of points, that's the tie right there. So there you go. At 14 is St. Francis, 13 Daytona State, 12 Lindsey Wilson, 11 Kansas Wesleyan, 10 Weber, 9 Ferrum, 8 Life, 7 St. Thomas, 6 Baker, 5 Milligan, 4 Kaiser, 3 Ottawa, 2 Florida Gateway, and at number 1 now for a couple weeks is Warner. And so we definitely have a couple changes here. Some teams moving up and down, some drastic changes for sure. And so let's go ahead and hop right into it, starting with the teams that were just out. we have 5 of them here in Marymount, Ventura, Roberts Wesleyan, Immaculata, and Midland. Let me go ahead and read the reasons because, those teams were all ranked by some of us here. So let's go ahead and read the reasons here. Let's start with the Marymount. They actually were just outside here, just 2 points outside from making our top 25. But this is what Cody had to say about Marymount. He said, got their get back over top ECAC teams and are back in the top 25. They also won a couple games in their conference as well. And so right now they don't have the head. Well, they have the head-to-head. Record-wise, I think it may be a little bit different. But I think right now they have the head-to-head against almost all the teams at the top of their conference. So we'll see how that goes. Women's College Flag Football, make sure you check them out at womenscollegeflagfootball.com and Women's College Flag Football on social media. But he went ahead and said here, Marymount is finishing March looking like a top 10 team. They won 4 straight games to close the week and didn't allow a single point here, outscoring Centenary, Newman, Holy Family, and number 16 Immaculata by a combined score of 185-0. And yeah, it was a very impressive weekend. I think the tough start is definitely holding them back from being top 25, but don't be surprised if they move up here soon. Just outside as well is Ventura College, the JUCO out of Cali. Cody said this will remain here after the other Cali JUCO teams added an L there in his rankings. And then Gino said Ventura seems to be the most consistent right now out of all the Cali JUCOs. So there you go. Roberts Wesleyan got a rank here as well, a vote here. Women's College Flag Football said, absolutely dominant start for this Northeastern program. Let's see where it goes from there. And I got to agree. I got to shout them out here. Right now, they are undefeated. Not a lot of games scheduled for their first season. I think already schedule-wise, in their schedule, they're either halfway or already halfway through. And they've only played 6 games. And so would love to see them play more, next year. But, this is a very talented program. And so very interesting for sure. Immaculata is another honorable mention. Women's College Flag Football says their momentum finally hit a wall on March 29th against a red-hot Marymount squad who beat them 27-0. But the Macs have firmly established themselves as an East Coast threat. And that is true. That is just a tough loss to Marymount here. They had a chance to take control of the Atlantic East, and they just missed it. And then last but not least, we have Midland here. I think Cody was the one who ranked them right here, and they just missed our top 25, but Cody said this team barely hangs on with over a 500 record despite losses to other top 25 teams. So there you go there. But let's get into our top 25, and right away at 25 we actually have a tie. These two teams near the bottom of our rankings, our top 25 rankings, mind you, they're still good, but very interesting squads, and that is Campbellsville University, the NAI school, who just hosted the Flag Football Frenzy, and then we have Eastern University on the East Coast out of the Atlantic East here. Let's go ahead and let's actually start with Eastern here. Gino said this, despite the weird loss to Marymount, this Eastern squad has been rolling. Women's College Flag Football says Eastern may be the team to beat in the conference. Marymount and Immaculata look dangerous as well. So there you go. Now, and I would agree, I don't have them ranked just because they lost a tough one to Marymount 2 weeks ago, and I can't forget that one. That was a great opportunity. I think right now they are definitely the number 2 team in the conference. If they were number 1, they would have beat Marymount. And so we'll see. I think that's the big one coming up. That one kind of feels like how Daytona State was with Florida Gateway. If anyone was going to beat them, it'd be them. And then they didn't. And on top of that, they didn't win, or they lost by a lot too. So tough to forget, but we'll see. Now let's talk about the team who is right there with them. And by the way, Eastern, I believe, drops a couple spots here. If I am not mistaken, they were not ranked, so they actually moved up and are ranked now after winning a couple more games. So there you go. Same with Campbellsville, who moves up from the unranked spots here. I don't think they're even getting votes last week here, but a big weekend at the Flag Football Frenzy goes ahead and launches them back into the top 25. Cody says this: big win over Life, and the record reflects a middling season, but when they're on, they are on. Gino says, despite the weird not the weird loss. He says the win over Life is the perfect example of how hot and cold this team is. You can't deny the talent, though. And I gotta agree. I do have to say this because we've been having this conversation behind closed doors here, but I gotta put this out there. When Alex Odom plays, I feel like there is a difference in the ceiling of this team. She's consistently somebody, no matter who they play, when she gets to play, she is guaranteed an offensive touchdown and an interception because she is that talented. And then a whole bunch of other stuff as well. But, there's been a couple games this season where she has not played. And so I assume it's injuries, just nagging and then resting and whatnot like that as well. Especially this last weekend with so many games back to back, right? But, this is a different team when she plays. It just adds on another weapon on offense and defense here. She's a great player, but right now this is my personal opinion, but I feel like the inconsistency of her availability does affect how good Campbellsville can be. For now, though, she showed up last week. I think she still missed the game, though, but she showed up last week, and she had a great week here, as well as the rest of this Campbellsville team. Got to shout out Corinne Talkington, who I feel like has taken a step forward. The receiving core they have around her as well. Defensively, they've done their thing. Tamaya Woody is playing at a very high level at linebacker. They got some wins, They got some big wins at home, and you absolutely love to see that. Now, moving on to number 24, we have Lisa McRae, and I'm pretty sure I'm the only one who ranked them here. Got some big wins here over Mars Hill, 73-6, as well as Mount St. Mary's, 42-0. But they also played Milligan here on Thursday, March 26th, and they only lost 12-13. It was a very close game. In fact, I don't know if there's any other team that gave Milligan a scare like that. Let me actually go ahead and take a look here. Yeah, I think that is the only score. That is the only one-score game that they have on their schedule right now. And so, got to give Lisa McRae a lot of credit here. They just fell a little bit short. I mean, even just looking at the stats and whatnot, right? They didn't have any turnovers. They didn't score enough, and so it happens. It is what it is. I honestly think, they had one turnover. I guess they had a pass attempt by Mackenzie Walker, which is kind of random. But even then, I felt like they have always been a top 25 team. They just move a couple spots up for me, which is why they are able to overcome some of the other rankers and them not ranking them here. But, I think they've done a good job. A 2-1 is not bad, especially with your one loss being a literal 1-point loss to a top... this team's been in the top 5 for most of this season. I think that definitely matters, and I don't think that's unlucky. So, there you go. I believe in Lisa McRae. So, yeah. Now, at 23 is Saddleback, who does move down a couple spots here. Women's College Flag Football said this: a mixed week for Saddleback. They looked elite in a 40-0 blanking of Norco, but hit a speed bump later in the week, suffering a surprising 26-6 loss to Irvine Valley. And yeah, that's a tough one. I don't think anybody else had Saddleback ranked here. I don't believe so. Just because you can't lose to Irvine Valley 26-6. I know it's like a 3-headed race right now, a 3-horse race between Saddleback, Ventura, and Irvine Valley. That is a tough loss to suffer when you are pretty much neck and neck as far as Cali JUCOs go. So, tough one for them. They do move down 2 spots. If they lose again, they are definitely in danger of falling out and another team replacing them. Now at 22 is Aurora, who does move up 3 spots here. Women's college flag football says this: Aurora continues to protect their perfect record. They wrapped up their late March slate with a commanding 33-12 win over Purdue Northwest. And I gotta say, that win was definitely impressive for them. I believe over a D2 program as well. I don't think Aurora has lost yet. They haven't lost this season. They just haven't played the most games here. And so I'm just going to say this. For me personally, there could be an opportunity for them to move up here in the coming weeks. So we'll see. We'll definitely see. Now, 21 is Thomas, who was previously unranked. I think they got votes still last week. Maybe somebody voted for them. But they go ahead and they move up 8 spots here. A massive, massive comeback for them. Let's go ahead and go to the reasons here, starting with Cody. What an upset for the Nighthawks. I'm not sure if that really changes the outlook on the season, but a blowout win over a conference opponent is still baller. Gino says, yes, they got smoked by Warner, but the way they beat Weber is enough for me to get them back in these rankings. And I absolutely got to agree with that. They blew out Weber, and it looked like a classic Thomas win. This is definitely, I would say so far in Coach Seals' career, a signature win for her right here over Weber. Just a massive, massive win over there. And it wasn't close, and I made sure to look at Weber's website just to see and whatnot. I don't think they were missing anybody. And Thomas, I don't think they had Ariana Christian for this game either. So a massive win for Thomas. Got to feel good about them. Now, as far as the outlook looks here in the NAI, they got to be a top 8 team in the country to make it. A win over Weber does help their argument. Is it too little, too late? It might be, unless they get another upset. I think another upset could propel them forward. Right now, they're 7-6. And actually, never mind. I don't think they will get another chance. To get Reinhardt, Point, and Bruden Parker Christian, they'll beat all of them, but I don't think any of those teams are really competing for a spot here. The Weber win is definitely their biggest win. Just looking at their schedule right here, right now. But what makes that one tough is that they also lost to Weber in overtime earlier on in the season. So that also doesn't look good here. So I honestly don't know if they make the Invitational this year, but I will say as far as culture cultivating goes, this is a good one for sure. So we'll see what happens, but big win for Thomas, and I think it's more than justified that they come back into our top 25. Now, tied at 19 here is Huntington and Gallaudet. Huntington still here from last week. Gallaudet moving up 2 spots. Let's talk about Huntington first here. Cody says they're 13-2, and others have stumbled along and stumbled back, so they'll shoot up. Gino says very much looking forward to see what they do against Milligan, which I agree. And then Women's College Flag Football says Huntington does exactly what highly ranked teams are supposed to do against unranked teams. That is dominate. And yeah, gotta love what they're doing here. I know one of their losses, at least losses to ranked teams, is to Campbellsville, who I believe is right behind them. So there is that. They just haven't had the hardest schedule, but they have won a lot of games here. I am interested to see how this Milligan game goes, though. Like Gino said, if they win this one, there could be some big results coming from that one. And Huntington, they're almost done with their season 2. I don't believe they have a conference tournament, at least this year. They don't. They have maybe a couple games left here, but, at 13-2, regardless of how this Milligan game goes, you got to feel good about it. If you're Huntington, you got to feel proud of the effort you were able to put forward this season, because it's definitely an improvement from last season. So there you go. Now at 19 as well as Gallaudet. Speaking of last season, they dominated. This season it continues. Still undefeated. They move up 2 spots. Women's College Flag Football says Gallaudet continues to quietly climb the ranks. They stayed perfect with a 52-0 shutout win over Howard Community College, followed by solid wins over Solid Cairn and Penn State Harrisburg teams. Gino says just running up the score on everybody they see. And then Cody says this squad makes an appearance after still remaining undefeated. And look, this was a big weekend here in the United East here. Gallaudet at the top playing Penn State Harrisburg, who is number 2. And then I want to say Karen might have been either 3 or 4 here. But they go ahead and get big wins here. I think those wins over this weekend almost certainly locks up the United East Conference already for Gallaudet. Almost certainly. Right, so we will see what happens with Gallaudet, right? But undefeated still, as other teams in the country lose on other levels, you could definitely see them move up. So we'll see about Gallaudet though. Now at 18 is Lindsey Wilson, who falls 6 spots here. Kind of a tough week here. Let's go ahead and talk about it, starting with the women's college flag football. Lindsey Wilson took care of business against Cumberland, Siena Heights, and Wittenberg. No shame in a 40-12 loss to a live team that can beat anyone. Gino said if only it were just a live game, but there are actually a couple games in the Campbellsville Frenzy where Amaya Pablo was struggling with accuracy or turnovers. Hopefully they can still squeeze in the playoffs with this loss. And then Cody says brutal loss to life. That makes the Campbellsville game even more weighted. So yeah, I mean, the life game was supposed to definitely be maybe one of the last tickets they needed to punch to go ahead and make this NAI Invitational. And unfortunately, they just couldn't get past them. And on top of that, they lost by a lot too. It wasn't really a close game at all throughout this, this matchup here. And I think some of it, well, a lot of it is life just being way more experienced, having gone through a gauntlet. With Lindsey Wilson, I think there were definitely some, I would just be honest, I think there's definitely a little bit of a skill gap, at least as of right now here. Amaya Pablo wasn't super efficient, but I think it's not just her as well. Right, if you get what I'm trying to put down. And so a tough go for them. They already got blown out by Campbellsville earlier on in the season. They play them later this week, so maybe there's redemption, but I think the only way for Lindsey Wilson to make the Invitational is that they have to beat Campbellsville, they have to beat Milligan. And then I don't know if they could afford a loss to another NAI team. They could lose to like Emmanuel or Aurora, right? I don't think that the committee will hold that against them, but I think for them to make it in, they absolutely need wins against Campbellsville and Milligan, especially with those 2 big losses. So tough for Lindsey Wilson. They are a first-year program, though. I think there are high expectations for them because they've won so much already so early. They've been so successful. But you got to remember they're a first-year program. I think they'll be fine. Either way, I think their season, I mean, it's as good as it gets for a first-year program. So there you go. Now at 17, another team that is dropping here by a lot, dropping 7 spots, is Weber. Cody said this, yikes, the Thomas loss is no bueno, and they need to collect their things to compete in the Sun Conference and fight for a chance to appear at Nationals. Gino said this, they had Destiny Lockett looking like Jaden Daniels based on the box score. That game versus Thomas pretty much wraps up their season in a bow, unfortunately. I think I might have to agree here. But women's college flag football also says, started the week strong with a 19-0 shutout over Alabama State, but got completely stunned by Thomas, 45-6 in a blowout loss. And I mean, let's just look at their season. So already they lost to St. Francis, which is tough because that is also a team that is kind of on the edge, vying for a spot in the NAI Invitational. So that's a tough loss to drop. Also, that one was at home too. So there you go. Then they lose to Life as well. Another team that was vying for a spot here that also suffered some losses as well, I believe, this week here. And we'll talk about them soon. But you can't lose 2 games against teams that are looking to make the Invitational and are just on that bubble, right? At least you cannot do that without beating another quality opponent by a decent amount here. And then you add on this blowout over Thomas here. And I just don't know what happened. Honestly, I don't know what happened. 45 points does not just happen. Destiny Lockett, 6 touchdowns and a rushing touchdown. She had 7 touchdowns in this game. And the defense for Weber, which I feel like I've been really high on, just kind of, I don't know, man. They just did not play well at all this game. And it's not like they were really missing anybody. I see Kalia Gator here, Riley Bolser, Balako, John Edwards, Savannah Cox, Shine Duran, Sigmundi. I don't know. I don't know. That is a tough way to go here if you are Weber, because I do unfortunately think, like Gino said, I don't see a way they make the Invitational without them upsetting either Kaiser or Warner. I think if they do that, then yeah, for sure, we got a conversation. Even then, I mean, I think you for sure have to also beat St. Thomas, right? That's another team on the edge of this thing that is trying to make it in. You got to beat teams that are on that edge. You got to replace teams in front of you. That's just what it is. You know, these teams are directly in front of you. You got to replace them with a direct win, get that head-to-head. And so, luckily for Weber, I don't want to say their season's over. That's not fair to say at all. That's assuming a lot, to be honest with you. So let me backtrack that. But you got Kaiser, you got Warner, you got St. Thomas. I think no matter what, a 2-1 record in these last 3 games will get you into the Invitational. And then ideally, if you could also do well in the conference tournament, that only adds to the resume. But unfortunately, right now, it's looking a little murky for Weber. They still have an argument, but it's looking murky. Now, moving on. At 16, we have Daytona State here, who does drop 3 spots here. This is what Cody said, maybe a dramatic drop for Daytona, but most of these other teams played each other in split games, whereas Daytona lost to a non-25 opponent. And granted, it was a club team, so they weren't going to get ranked anyways. But I'm just putting that out there. Gino said this, losing to UCF is just not what you want to see from a team who is wanting to be the top JUCO squad. Combine that with how badly they lost to Florida Gateway the first time they played, and I'm really not loving the ceiling of this team this season. Okay, I am going to have a differing opinion from Gino and Cody here. I literally think they're fine. UCF is not a bad club team by any means. I think that if we were ranking club teams, they'd be up there for sure. So I don't view that as a tough one. Even then, I mean, they're not getting ranked. None of the club teams in the country are getting ranked. So that game pretty much does not mean anything to me. The Florida Gateway game, it was a couple weeks ago. It's still tough, but I will say this for Daytona State. They will get a chance at Florida Gateway, I think, one more time in the regular season tomorrow, April 1st, Wednesday. When I'm recording this, it is it's March 31st. So tomorrow, April 1st, they will get a shot at them. If they split with Florida Gateway, they are back in business. I'm not buying into the negativity. I think this team has made some improvements compared to last season. I mean, last season they were 10-8, mind you, so just keep that in mind. This season they play less games. They're 9-2, but they won some decent games here against Siena Heights, against Lisa McRae, Penn State Schuylkill. They beat them by a lot. Bruton Parker Christian, DuPage, right? But you cannot allow one team to have your number. And so we're going to see what happens tomorrow. By the time this episode releases and the rankings release, we'll see what happens. But, Daytona State, I am not too negative on you. I'm defending you right now. So just keep that in mind. Now at 15 is Life. They do drop 7 spots here. Oh boy. Let's go ahead and talk about it. They got to participate in the Flag Football Frenzy that went down in Campbellsville this last weekend. And, they went 2-2. On top of that, they lost to Warner 20-32, which is not the worst, right? That's definitely respectable. But going 2-2 at the Frenzy is definitely not what you want. So let's talk about it. Women's College Flag Football said this. Life's schedule is a gauntlet, but they are holding their own. They secured a massive 40-12 win over Lindsey Wilson and handled Cumberland. So that is something in their 2 wins in the Flag Football Frenzy. Gino says that Campbellsville loss is ultimately what brings Life back down to earth here at 16. They murdered Lindsey Wilson, but couldn't get it done versus St. Francis or Campbellsville. definitely enough for me to drop them. Cody says this, they win some and they lose some that are surprising. Had to drop because of the loss to Campbellsville, but keeping them up here because of the Lindsey Wilson win and etc. Yeah, look, here's what happened last week. So, started with a loss to Warner, 20-32. Not bad at all considering Warner is killing teams by 50 pretty consistently here. So, and they're the number one team in the country. So not bad, right? Then they go down to Kentucky. They take care of first-year program 25-14. A win's a win. Maybe you wanted to win by a little bit more against first-year program, but it's still a win. You didn't get upset. Then you play St. Francis later in the day, and you lose a tough one, 18-27 to a first-year program. Another team who is more so on the outside looking in. I would say more so on the fence, right? They are trying to make the flag football invitational here, and we'll talk about them later. But you know, they're in a similar boat as you, for sure, and you lose to them. That is really tough. Cannot allow that to happen by just barely over a score. You know, so tough there. Then they play Campbellsville the next day, and they lose. Not only do they lose to them, but they lose by 2 scores to a team that was not ranked at all. Not ranked at all. And I don't think is going to make the NAI Invitational. That is maybe the death sentence. Campbellsville might have went ahead. I mean, that's a massive upset for them. Good for Campbellsville. But they might have went ahead and ended some of those postseason hopes, at least after the conference tournament, for life. Because that is just a win that you cannot suffer. I already suffered one against a team in the same position as you as St. Francis. Losing in an upset like this to Campbellsville is tough. They do beat Lindsey Wilson, so they take out another team that was on that fence, right? 40-12, and it's a dominant win, so that is definitely a plus. But when you look at their schedule, I mean, there are games that you definitely want back, right? You want back. You wish you could have beaten St. Thomas, because then, you know, the resume definitely looks better. Against Kaiser, you probably could have played them closer if you played Warner 32-20. So that's a tough one for sure here. Unfortunately, the Florida Gateway game is technically a scrimmage. It is what it is. But, you know, what are you going to do? And then you beat Cumberland. You beat Lindsey Wilson, who were kind of in that running for that spot in the NAI Invitational. But you lose to St. Francis, who was also in the running. And then you lose to a team that wasn't going to make it in Campbellsville. The next couple games are against Point, Bruton Parker, Reinhardt, Alabama State. I expect them to win those, and maybe the Point one might be a little bit closer, I guess. I would assume that'd be their closest game, but I don't think a win over Point, even if all of these are all blowouts, I don't think that will be enough to get them in. At that point, they would be 10-5. They would be hoping to make the Sun Conference tournament and then upsetting somebody in the Sun Conference. That would be their last gasp at, you know, really buffing at that resume to make the NAI Invitational. So just an unfortunate weekend. And so they, you know, I think admittedly, they drop in our rankings because they just were not consistent enough. And so, you know, they had some good weeks. They've improved in some ways, even shorthanded. But that is just, you can't lose like that. So right now they're at 15 in the country. It's not bad. You know, I think there are a lot of other teams that wish they were here for sure. But as far as your NAI Invitational hopes go, it is in a very rough spot. Very rough spot for sure. It low-key might take a miracle. So we'll see. Now, tied at 13 are 2 teams who are on the rise here, Wingate and St. Francis. Let's talk about St. Francis here. Cody says is that they're a KCAC contender. They're not in the KCAC, actually, Cody. Sorry to call you out there, bud. But, you know, they are a contender for the NAI Invitational, I think, still. Gino says this about St. Francis. They went out and dominated the Campbellsville Flag Frenzy with 5 wins and no losses, including a big win over Life. Women's college flag football said, oh, what a gritty, battle-tested week for St. Francis. They picked up 3 hard-fought wins against quality opponents, Edge and Campbellsville 32-26, Life 27-18, and Cumberland 21-14. Yeah, a huge week for them. Undefeated last week. They are now on a 5-game win streak here. I will say their wins over Graceland and Midland, those are decent squads. Love to see that. You go ahead and take out Campbellsville again. A little bit closer than what you want for sure here, but a win is a win. Then you get the win that you were looking for here over Life, 27-18. That is a massive win for them. That is going to look great on their resume there. And then they go ahead and beat Cumberland in overtime, right? But a win is a win. You will take that as well. Like I said, a 5-game winning streak. They are now 8-4 here. They play, I think they only have 2 games left. They play Wittenberg and Siena Heights here. I think that's it. Yeah, and then their inaugural season's over, so not a lot of games. When you look at their losses, the loss to Siena Heights, 24-18 at the beginning of the season, a double overtime loss. You definitely wish you got that one back. I think when you play Siena Heights the second time, for any chance to make the NAIA Invitational, you got to leave, no doubt. Big win over Thomas. Love seeing that. That's definitely a good one for their resume. Beat Florida Memorial by a decent amount. Lost to Kaiser 35-12, which is tough. Lost to St. Thomas 32-20. That might have been a winnable game if they played a more complete game, but dropped that one. You get a big win here over Weber, 21-12, and then drop a big one to Warner, which is understandable. But since then, a 5-game winning streak here. If they make the NAIA Invitational at the end of this season, they will probably just barely make it in, but they need some big wins here at the end. So we'll see. It doesn't help that they only have 2 games, though. I will say that. So right now, tied at 13 with Wingate, who has moved up 5 spots here. I feel like we are very active in our reaction to Wingate here. That's just my opinion, but this is what Women's College Flag Football had to say. Wingate proved they can hang with tough competition, securing a great 28-12 win over Ferrum and beating Mars Hill. Their only one slip-up was a loss to undefeated Milligan. Gino said that Milligan game was not pretty at all, but the win over Ferrum is really what is keeping me so high on them. Cody said winning some and losing some, just brutal for this team to have to battle through health issues and absences of athletes. Look, I got to give Wingate some credit here. Without your starting quarterback, without a starting quarter as well, they have made do with what they've had, and they've grinded out some tough games. I think that game against Ferrum, it wasn't the prettiest. I think it could have gotten out of hand a lot quicker if they did not have so many turnovers in the second half. But Wingate, they played really good football right there. And, you got to feel good about that. They also went ahead and beat Mars Hill, too, not overlooking them or anything. And so you got to give them credit for that as well. And then they go ahead and they play Milligan. And, it's not the worst score. Could have been better. They lose 26-7. I think offensively, they just, I guess, took for granted too many drives here and just could not get going there, while the defense, I felt like, settled in eventually. And it was just tough. It was just tough. The offense couldn't keep up. So at this point, they are 5-2. That's not counting their exhibition games against Reinhardt, Ottawa, and Kaiser, where, they beat Reinhardt, only lost by 6 to Ottawa, and then lost to Kaiser by a whole bunch. Other than that, the resume looks pretty good as far as ranked teams go. That 27-38 loss to Barden was tough for sure. Milligan was the one that got, the most out of hand. That's definitely a fact, right? But man, are they competing in the Conference Carolinas here. That win over Ferrum is absolutely massive. Now, they get Mount St. Mary's and Chown this week. I assume that they win by a decent amount this week, and then they play Emmanuel. That's another team that's trying to sneak into, the top spots here in the Conference Carolinas. You cannot overlook them. That is for sure. So look out for Wingate here. Even when they are not healthy, maybe they could make some moves here. And I know this is just something that's interesting, right? That I am going to put out there. Haley Bowie or Buis, 10 of 12, 94 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 pick when she got in there at quarterback. and was very efficient. And Janelle Francis is definitely somebody that adds a lot of juice to your receiving core too. So, it'll be interesting to see what they continue to do at the quarterback position. That could affect how the rest of this season goes, as I unfortunately think Sailor Swanson's season is probably over. I think maybe she could still medical redshirt. I don't know. We will see. She only played 3 games. I don't know. We'll see. I don't know if they want to risk playing her and burning her freshman year, if that is an option, right? So we'll see for Wingate, though. We'll see for Wingate. Right now, they're at 13 here, and they are battling. At 12 is the team they beat, though, Ferrum, who drops out of the top 10 because of that loss. This is what Cody says. Tough to be upset by Wingate, but still like their health more than the Dogs to keep them somewhat up here. So you could thank Cody for them being ranked above Wingate. Gino says they got outplayed by Wingate's backup quarterback, so not great, but they answered nicely with 2 wins over King and the Mount to close out the week. Women's college flag football says Ferrum's offense was volatile but explosive after dropping a 28-12 game to Wingate. They took their frustrations out on Mount St. Mary's and King. 61-0 over the Mount, 59-24 over King. Yeah, I mean, not bad for sure. Look, that loss to Wingate, though, that is the one that does matter, unfortunately. Offensively, I don't know what was going on with Pace and Shreve, but she just looked indecisive. It just looked like a bad game for them, which, it happens. She's allowed to have, for sure. Definitely allowed to have here. But this upcoming week, looking very interesting here. Again, North Carolina Central on Thursday, right? I think that should probably be a win. But then they play Gallaudet. A rare crossover. United East coming to the Conference Carolinas here. Gallaudet on a hot streak, undefeated. They've been smacking teams, and Ferrum gets to host them at home. That will definitely be a game to watch on April 3rd there. Ferrum versus Gallaudet. That could get them right back in the swing of things. And then they get Lise McRae, Chowan, and Mars Hill to end the regular season. That Lise McRae game is going to matter a whole bunch, but I don't think you can overlook Gallaudet right now. So we'll see. If she could have a big game against a team like Gallaudet, that would be a huge confidence booster for them. That's a quality team right there. So don't sleep on Ferrum just yet. One bad game doesn't define their season. So there you go. Now at 11 is Hope, who is shooting up the rankings. Goes up to number 6 here. This is what Women's College Flag Football said. Hope put together a solid week, securing convincing wins over La Sierra 35-0 and Simpson 26-12. Gino says this, have not lost in weeks and have completely solidified themselves as the top team in the GSAC. Hope is now very much in talks to make the Final 8 for playoffs this year. Cody says this, hope remains for this team as they collect wins. And I gotta agree, look, they beat La Sierra and Simpson. Those are the 2 teams that were really challenging them for that top spot in the GSAC, at least for this first year here in the regular season, right? So I think as of right now, they have probably already locked up the GSAC conference title, regular season conference title, but that does matter as whoever wins this conference, I believe they still have a conference tournament though, but whoever wins this conference will get an automatic bid to the NAI Invitational. That is confirmed because I think there's more than 6 teams, I want to say, over there. Or there's more than 5 teams. I don't know what the number was. So I am pretty sure that they have an automatic bid if they win their conference. That means winning in the conference tournament. And I think being ranked the number 1 team going into that tournament, you really can't go wrong with that. That is a big time advantage. I mean, all these teams are first year programs, right? But that is a massive advantage to go ahead and have here in year 1. And they've been rolling. Nobody else has really been that close. And that St. Thomas win, day by day, looks better and better. So they could be guaranteeing themselves a spot here. It's almost all but guaranteed. They got to finish out the season and their conference tournament. But, look out for Hope, though. At 10 is Barden College, who goes ahead and moves up 5 spots here. Cody says this, these dogs stay rolling and gnawing upwards in the rankings. Gino says their stacked wide receiver and cornerback room has his team on the edge of the top 10 contention. They are top 10 actually in our rankings, so there is that to consider. Women's college flag football says Barden showed resilience this week. They survived a 26-24 nail biter against Emmanuel before taking care of Mount St. Mary's 20-6 here. By the way, make sure you check out my recap of that game, that Emmanuel Barden game, which is one of my favorites from this season. But yeah, they did. Right now, they are 8-1. They are in control. This weekend, it's another big one. They get King and they get Lise McRae on the same day here. Can't sleep on Lise McRae. That was a team that was battle-tested early on. They have won. They're on a winning streak right now. Got to look out for them. And then obviously can never overlook a team like King here, who just got their first win last week. But that is definitely a team you do not want to lose to here in the Conference Carolinas. After that, they get a 10-day break before they play Mount Olive here. And so it's going to be a key couple games here. Their only loss right now is to Ferrum, who just lost to Wingate. So things are getting interesting here in the Conference Carolinas. That is for sure. Couple things to monitor, though, as we go into the conference tournament and even this weekend. You know, Sawyer Rigdon, once again, against Mount St. Mary's, did not play, really. Got one pass attempt. Let's see. That's it. This is not... Oh, and one, I guess, rush attempt as well, which is kind of random, if you ask me. But, you know, that is it. This is not the first time she has missed a game against Challenge. She didn't play either of those games. So it could be a rest thing, right? They're playing a lot of games this season, especially they're playing a lot of multi-game days here. So there's that. But maybe there's something health-wise lingering there. We'll see what happens. You know, we'll definitely see what happens going into this week here, but obviously cannot afford to lose as dynamic a player as Sawyer Rigdon. We'll see if she comes back this weekend and helps them go 2-0. So there you go. Moving on here at number 9 is Nevada State, making our top 10 for the first time as they shoot up 6 spots. Women's college flag football said this: the West Coast power remains unblemished. They took care of business in the desert, blanking OUAZ 40-0 and Benedictine Mesa 44-0 before handling Grand Canyon 25-6, still undefeated. Gino says this: two Team USA members on the squad now. It's a shame that they don't play Hope International this year, and I gotta agree with that. That would definitely be the battle for the West Coast right there. Cody says they are still undefeated and want to give them a seat here, as they'll probably become a part of the NAI and the GSAC, so they're here as the top of that conference, kind of. Not officially yet, though, so just remember that. But they are playing well. You know, you can't deny that. Playing well right now. Also undefeated and dominating, so yeah. At 8 is Kansas Wesleyan, who moves back into our top 10, going back up 3 spots here. Cody says, back inside the top 10. Massive win for the Yotes, pulling off the upset over Ottawa and showing at their best. Oh, never mind. I guess Cody did not have more to say there. So, yeah, there you go. Gino said this: that big win over Ottawa is more than enough to get the Coyotes back in the top 8. These KCAC playoffs are about to be nuts. And then Women's College Flag Football says the Coyotes made a massive statement by handing number 3 Ottawa a 21-20 loss. They followed up that thriller by blanking Southwestern 39-0 and William Woods 32-0. A very dominant week by Kansas Wesleyan. Can't overlook those Southwestern and William Woods wins right there. But beating Ottawa is massive. They pulled that one out. Shahira Owada. I mean, there's definitely a case for MVP. Let's be honest. She is in that race here. But we're going to talk about that later on here in this episode. But big win for K-Dub here. Wins for K-Dub as they move back in the top 10. With the win over Ottawa, things get interesting. I think there's definitely now a scenario where you could see 3 teams from a conference making these NAI invitationals here, which would almost be half of the teams in the invitational. So we'll see how they weight those wins and how everything unfolds moving forward. But it looks like it's going to come down to the conference tournament at the very least. At number 7, though, is St. Thomas, who stays right here. Cody says the Bobcats rest or real test lays ahead, but they remain here for now. Gino says STU's consistency is something to really admire. They've got a great system and a great culture over there. And then Women's College Flag Football said the Bobcats secured a gritty defensive 1-0 victory over Reinhardt. That was a forfeit by Reinhardt to keep their momentum rolling. And yeah, St. Thomas, I mean, look, they only have one loss right now, I believe, which is the Hope, which, hindsight's 2020. It definitely helps. That Hope is going to go ahead and probably win the GSAC over there on the West Coast. So that's good, right? They have wins over Campbellsville, Siena Heights, St. Francis, Point, who are all trying to get in here. Obviously good things. This week is going to be big for them. They have a tough week. They got Warner and they got Kaiser, the top of the Sun Conference here. If you are St. Thomas, I don't know about best case scenario, but I think a favorable scenario if you are St. Thomas is either beating Warner or beating Kaiser. If you do one of those two things, it probably does not matter what happens in the next game. I mean, ideally, obviously, you beat both of them. But I think the favorable outcome would be splitting this matchup right here. And I guess if worse comes to worse, even if you play both these teams within a score or two, that is also good. But there's definitely an opportunity to secure their spot in the NAI Invitational, potentially. I mean, there's still, I don't know if they're keeping in mind conference tournaments, to be honest, now that I'm actually thinking about it. But, in the regular season, at least, this would definitely make or break your resume potentially. Then they get FMU and Weber after that. That Weber game is also going to be important, but they got to focus on Kaiser and Warner, who is directly in front of them. But this could be an opportunity for them to not only move up in our rankings, but move up in the NAI rankings for sure. At 6 is Baker, who stays right here. Cody says Baker stayed in motion, but still going to keep them behind Ottawa for a head-to-head loss. Gino says, I think this offense should be putting up a lot crazier numbers than what they are currently putting up. This team is so much better than only 6 points against Ottawa. And yeah, I gotta agree there. Women's College Flag Football said Baker's defense was a brick wall this week. They didn't allow a single point, shutting out William Woods 42-0 before hanging a jaw-dropping 82-0 scoreline on Bethel. Yeah, a big week for Baker here. Unfortunately, that loss against Ottawa is going to haunt them here because it's their only loss right now. They are 10-1. They beat Kansas Wesleyan by a lot. That is going to help them a whole bunch. And actually, really, when you think about it, I mean, you get Cotty, Midland, Graceland, right? I think those are all games that are probably favored in decent squads. Then you have your KCAC tournament, I believe, before you figure out who goes to this invitational. Really, when you look at it for Baker, they might have already guaranteed a spot in the NAI Invitational by playing Ottawa within 6 and then just absolutely blasting Kansas Wesleyan. Like, they could lose to Kansas Wesleyan, but as long as it's not, worse than their blowout against them, I think that kind of knows itself out. Against Ottawa, ideally, you get a win, right? You get a win the next time you play them, and that guarantees you a spot in the NAI Invitational. So that's what it's looking like for Baker. They're in an okay spot, 10-1. But that is definitely, that one loss, though, to Ottawa is definitely a game that they probably wish they got back because they could have won there. Now, at 5 right now is Ottawa, who moves down 2 spots here. Let's start with Women's College Flag Football. A tough week for the Braves as they suffered a heartbreaking 21-20 loss to Kansas Wesleyan in a Midwest battle. To their credit, they bounced back. They bounced right back to absolutely dismantle St. Mary 40-7 and Midland 48-0. Gino said their defense got beaten up badly despite the score against Kansas Wesleyan. This worries me big time if Ottawa has to face a Warner or a Kaiser again in the playoffs, which I agree with that. Cody says this, only their second loss this season to a K-Dub team, making these standings extra interesting, and the KCAC more interesting than ever. And yeah, I gotta agree with that. They barely beat Kansas Wesleyan, who, by the way, got blown out by Baker. And then Baker only lost to Ottawa by 6, so that more and more looks like maybe maybe a fluke of a game if Baker could come back and win it, and they don't play again until the conference tournament. And so things are definitely interesting here. There is a 3-horse race in the KCAC as well, as it's going to come down to the wire here. Ottawa, Baker, Kansas Wesleyan all battling. There is a scenario where all of them make the NAI Invitational, because you also got to remember Ottawa beat Kaiser when they went and visited them. But it would probably involve Ottawa maybe not even making the conference championship and it being a Baker Kansas Wesleyan conference championship. That is probably the only way them three make it. Or, I don't know. The committee sees those 3 teams and they're like, hey, they should definitely be in. But there's going to be some hard conversations to be had, though, when considering them. And then the whole bunch of Thomas teams who are right on the edge as well. So we will see. For now, Ottawa, if they could get another win over Baker or Kansas Wesleyan, no matter when it is, I think they definitely punch their ticket to the NAI tournament. And even if they don't, I think maybe it's a little bit more in the air, but it's just hard to see them not making it. So there you go. Now at 4 is Milligan, who moves up a spot. Cody has this to say, still undefeated, and pulling out the close ones. They deserve this bump up. Gino says Ottawa loses, so that means the 16-0 Buffaloes are sliding back into the top 4 in the nation. And then Women's College Flag Football says Milligan kept their perfect record intact, though they had to sweat out a tight 13-12 thriller against Lise McRae. They left no doubt in their other matchups, putting up 62 on King and then handling Wingate 26-7, which are all good wins, mind you. The Lise McRae one is definitely a little bit concerning. That is probably a game that a lot of teams will be looking at ahead of these NAI Invitationals, but I'm just going to be honest. I'm going to assume Milligan is going to make the Invitational. We'll see what happens. I heard some things about them maybe having to form a group with some other teams in the area in Kentucky and, doing a tournament or something there to have an automatic bid. But even then, I don't know. I don't see Milligan losing right now. Right now, Milligan is 16-0. As far as games left, they only have a handful here. They don't play this week, so they get a break. But then they come back. They play LaGrange. They play Huntington. That will be tough. No doubt about it. LaGrange and Huntington, that will definitely be tough. They beat LaGrange 42-0. Huntington, they beat 39-19. I will say this. They should probably beat LaGrange. The Huntington game might be one that is a little bit closer than before, so we'll see. And then following that, they get Emmanuel and Campbellsville. Campbellsville, that's a rivalry. Anything could happen there. Emmanuel is a team that they beat 37-7. We'll see if Emmanuel could turn that around. Lately, they've been doing decently here. Almost beating Barden, but falling a little bit short. We'll see what happens. I don't expect any surprises for Milligan. I think they should be a lock for the Invitational. I don't see a loss to one of these teams drastically dropping them out of the top 8. But we'll see, though. Alrighty, now at 3 is Florida Gateway, who does drop a spot here. Not because of anything they did, though. This is what Women's College Flag Football had to say about them. Florida Gateway's offense is firing on all cylinders. They pitched back-to-back shutouts, obliterating DuPage 74-0 and LaGrange 66-0. Gino says the top JUCO team in the country is firmly a top 3 team right now. And then Cody says no need to scoot this team either way. They do drop a spot, but it's because another team rose here. And so let's talk about that other team here. Now at number 2 is Kaiser, who goes ahead and moves up a spot. Cody says this is going to bump them up a notch for remaining undefeated in their conference and continuing the wins. Gino says Kaiser's back at their familiar number 2 spot in the nation. They are pretty firm here for me until they play Warner or they get upset in the meantime. Women's College Flag Football says the Seahawks are peaking at the right time. Closed out this week by hanging a massive 71-0 shutout on Florida Memorial, proving their defense is championship caliber. Looking at Kaiser right here, like Ottawa, like Milligan, like the team that's ahead of them right now, they are probably guaranteed a spot in the playoffs. Their only loss being a 4-point loss to Ottawa they've dominated other than that. Beat Life 46-13, St. Francis 35-12, Campbellsville 40-13, Thomas 41-6 here. You know, they're beating all the teams that are in front of them. This week they get Weber, they get St. Thomas. This is no time in the season to get comfortable, though. I think actually this episode should come out before they play Weber, so that'll be interesting. We'll see how that goes. They host Weber, mind you, and then they get St. Thomas in Miami Gardens on Saturday as well. Both those games could potentially be upset alert games. You never know. We'll see. For Kaiser, they got to continue rolling on because then after that, they got Warner, and that will be for the regular season Sun Conference title, and that's going to be important because I'm pretty sure whoever wins that hosts the postseason tournament, Sun Conference tournament, at home. So we'll see what happens. Can't overlook this weekend at all. Weber, St. Thomas, they have to get wins or at least play you close to go ahead and get in the NAI Invitational or at least really improve their chances at getting in. You know, and if they're going to play you in a close game, that always gets dangerous, right? So we'll see what happens there. But for Kaiser, you know, we'll see. Barring an upset, they should make the Invitational. Now at number 1 is Warner here for like the 4th week in a row, I think. Women's college flag football says they absolutely rolled through the last week of March, dropping 89 points on Alabama State and cruising past Life, Reinhardt, and Thomas by comfortable margins. Gino said Life got within 2 scores to show that Warner might actually be human after all, but then they murdered every other opponent after to take away that thought. Cody said still undefeated, but now needing to navigate some injuries heading into some major games, which is, I mean, yeah, that's valid. Look, for Warner, let's go ahead and look at their schedule here. Things are definitely slowing down as we are at the end here. You obviously have that big game at the end. We'll talk about that. Right now, they are 14-0. They get St. Thomas this week. Do not want to be upset by them, right? And St. Thomas, they're needing something either against Warner or Kaiser, so you know they're fiending for that. We'll see what happens. They play Florida Memorial. They should beat them. The next week, they get Weber, who's also fiending for something, right, to make it into the Invitational. Then after that, you get Kaiser, which will most likely definitely be for the Sun Conference regular season title. And I mean, I guess it's not the farthest drive. It's like what is this, 147 miles? That's a 2-hour, 20-minute drive. Let me go ahead and put that in context for me here real quick. That is roughly a little bit less if I was to drive from here to Wyoming. Oh, it's probably more closer to me driving to Kansas or to the border. So it's not like far at all. But you want to be at home. You want to be around your people. That definitely matters, though. That definitely matters. And I think another thing to keep in mind, you know, we are talking about the NAI Invitational here. So Warner, Kaiser, Ottawa, Milligan, probably as well, Baker and Kansas Wesleyan, to maybe a lesser degree, but we'll see, are all in play to host the NAI Invitational because the number 1 team in the country, as far as NAI teams go, get to do that. And so it's definitely where things get interesting. Right now, I mean, it's our personal rankings, right? Warner's at 1, Kaiser's at 2. I haven't checked the NAI rankings yet. I will pull them up as I speak. But right now, if you are Warner and Kaiser, you're looking at this and you are like, hey, you know, doesn't matter if it's the regular season, doesn't matter if we'll get another shot at it after the regular season. You know, you really want to get these wins. Like, really, really want to get these wins because you never know. Because that one, the NAI Invitational, that will matter. If there is a home field advantage to be had, you for sure got to fight for that spot because that could mean the difference between a national championship and going home second or third. Just being completely honest with you. So we'll see what happens, right? And also excited because we are planning to go to those. If Yeah, we are planning to go to those. One of us, at least, is planning to go to those. I don't know about myself, but hopefully all three of us are there. It should be all, at least Cody and Gino. So we'll see about that. But definitely things to keep an eye on. These head-to-heads as we get down to the end of the season are going to matter on the NAIA level. So there you go. We'll see. But once again, that is your top 25. Just outside Marymount, Ventura, Roberts, Wesleyan, Immaculata, and Midland at 25, tied at 25. Campbellsville Eastern, 24 Lisa McRae, 23 Saddleback, 22 Aurora, 21 Thomas. Tied at 19 is Huntington and Gallaudet. At 18 is Lindsey Wilson, 17 Weber, 16 Daytona State, 15 Life. Tied at 13 is Wingate and St. Francis. 12 Ferrum, 11 Hope, 10 Barden, 9 Nevada State, 8 Kansas Wesleyan, 7 St. Thomas, 6 Baker, 5 Ottawa, 4 Milligan, 3 Florida Gateway, 2 Kaiser, and at number 1, again, is Warner. Alrighty, now, before we leave you, we are going to bring you our 2026 Women's College Flag Football End of the Year Award race update. So basically, we've been doing this for years, since 2022, but basically we have a number of awards that we have done since 2022, and before it's all just been on the NAIA level. Now this year, with the expansion of our coverage, we are now looking to open up our awards to any varsity program here, regardless of classification. So NAIA, NCAA, junior college, right? Those are all the players that could qualify for this. Now, we have a lot of awards. We have a best position player award, best quarterback, utility, receiver, rusher, linebacker, DB. We have most valuable playmaker that's basically the women's college flag football version of the Heisman. We have offensive playmaker of the year, defensive playmaker of the year. By the way, you can qualify for multiple awards. So if you're the MVP, you could also qualify for OPOY, DPOY. That is something that we changed last year, and we are continuing with that. But we are trying to highlight a lot of players, so that's what we're going to keep in mind when we vote, though. We have Newcomer of the Year, which exclusively goes to freshmen who had a great year, who had a big impact in their first year of women's college flag football. Then we have Breakout Player of the Year. This usually goes to players who are not freshmen, right? But they're players who potentially played last year, or they are coming onto the scene, the college scene, for the first time with a new program, and they just balled out and had a great season, right? Or it's a player that, just took a leap in their development and is a lot better than what they were potentially when they first played women's college flag football. So there you go. Then we have Coach of the Year, but we won't be announcing mid-season. I guess it's past mid-season races for that one. And then on top of that, we have our all-PMC team and our all-freshman team. What we will be doing, and I'm just pointing this out there, what we will be doing with our all-PMC and all-freshman team is that we will do a national all-PMC and freshman team, and then we will do an NAI all-PMC team, D1, D2 all-PMC team, and then JUCO all-PMC team as well as all freshmen, hopefully. And then I think D3 will be its own as well. And so we will do all that at the end of the season after all the conference tournaments at the very least. I know the NAI Invitational will be happening as well, but we are going to wait for all the conference tournaments to end, and then we will do our voting based off of the regular season, and then whatever contributions were able to be done in conference tournaments. But per usual, we will make sure to add the games played so that you could get a good idea of who has done what. And so right now, I have the list of players that we are considering. Is this a finalist list? No, because we are still looking to potentially add players who may make a push here in the second half of the season. But it is made up of players that we feel pretty good about. Most years that we have done this, it is very rare that we will add a player that ends up becoming a finalist at the end of the year. We try to be thorough. We want to highlight as many great performances as possible. That is what this is. And so let's go ahead and start with the best position player awards here. These are the players that we are considering for the best position players. Starting at quarterback, the best quarterbacks, so many, obviously, but these are the ones that we are considering as of right now. Katherine Hutchinson of Warner, Reggie Kaiser of Milligan, Ava Wallace of Kaiser, Amaya Pablo of Lindsey Wilson, Shahira Owada of Kansas Wesleyan, Tara Lorente of Baker, Sora Rigdon of Barton College, Kaylee Phillips of Nevada State, and Anna Anderson of Ottawa. And obviously we are open to hearing out if we missed anybody and whatnot, as long as you do it politely, and we will add them to the list and make sure to keep tabs on them. So there you go. At wide receiver, this one is always tough here, but this is what we have. Avalon Lux-Offerman of Warner, Krista Quinn of Milligan, Riley Bolser of Weber, Jessica Finley of Warner, Anna Vincentini of Warner, Madison Powell of Hope, Ashley Clam of Kaiser, Dakota Moberg of Kaiser, Kaylee Phillips of Baker, Aaliyah Wood of Kansas Wesleyan, Yvonne Brusso of Wingate, Natalia Hernandez de Leon of Lise McRae, Marley Hyde of Cumberland, Sarah Merritt of Barden, Valerie Ainge Bada of Barden, Holiness Hodges of Midland, Demoye Amoye of Eastern, Gianna Brown of Emmanuel, Gwen Carter of Emmanuel, Lily Rumrow of Milligan, Alyssa Ramos of King, I believe she's wide receiver and not utility, Haley Witherspoon of St. Francis, and Harmony Walker of St. Francis, and then last but not least, Michaela Navarro of Arizona Christian. At utility, these are players that played a little bit of wide receiver here, center, running back, quarterback, or moved all around here. There is a player that played a number of her snaps at wide receiver, but is currently a starting quarterback for the foreseeable future. We will reevaluate that at the end of the season, but that player is Janelle Francis of Wingate. And then here are the rest of them: Alyssa Linkus of Ottawa, Sanaya Waller of Baker, Sophia Caprio of Kaiser, Emma Caniglia of Illinois Wesleyan, Abby Flowers of Illinois College, Kyla Massenberg of Eastern, Kyla Rome of Huntington, Macy Taylor of Ferrum, Leah Cruz of St. Thomas, Jasmine Henry of St. Thomas. Leah Cruz also, by the way, playing some quarterback, but all over as well. Ashton Weirley of Milligan, and Jasenia Velez of Marymount. And so, like I said, that one will be an interesting one. We will come back to that one, obviously. I mean, with the rest of them, we'll come back to them at the end of the season and evaluate here. But these are players that are playing all over on offense here, and it's hard to identify them as just a quarterback or receiver or center, right? Now, at rusher here, going to the defensive side of the ball, we are considering for best rusher Yvonne Brusso of Wingate, Marian Torero Abrego of Warner, Adriana Williams of Warner, Kalia Gator of Weber, Lanaya Leone of St. Thomas, Sincere Johns of Huntington, Natalie Bush of Baker, Andrea Moon of Southwestern, Mariah White of Barden, Gracious Wise of Ferrum, Sophia Antunes Silva of Lise McRae, and Kira Zachary of Life. Now, at linebacker, we have DJ Paris, Dejanise Paris of Ottawa, Anna Vincentini of Warner, Lauren Clark of Warner, Riley Bolser of Weber, Dakota Moberg of Kaiser, Destiny Lockett of Thomas, Emily Good of Lindsey Wilson, Parker Bridges of Milligan, Mackenzie Walker of Lise McRae, Alyssa Ramos of King, Malaya Lotima Tonga of Ferrum, Holly Morhard of Illinois College, Mackenzie McMillan of La Sierra, Madison Powell of Hope, Tamaya Woody of Campbellsville, Addie Schillick of William Woods, Taylor Zelenardo of Simpson, Kenzie Fillion of Point, Shanair Shahid of Point, and Tamaya Carter of Huntington. So there you go there, your linebackers. Now at DB, this includes safeties and cornerbacks, mind you. We have Ashley Clam of Kaiser, Molly Shellpepper of Eastern, Caitlin Sigmundy of Weber, Jukani Washington of Ottawa, Tramisha Harris of Kaiser, Jessica Finley of Warner, O'Mariah Gordon of Warner, Igiana Edwards of Weber, Diva Jones of Thomas, and Annabelle Rhodes of Milligan, Samantha Pitzer of Ferrum, Faith Phillips of Baker, Haley Witherspoon of St. Francis, Jamie Spivey of Emmanuel, Valerie Bada of Barden, Zania Long of Barden, Deborah Aguirre, of Simpson, Cooper Promise of Life, and Shania Spencer of Daytona State. And so those are all the players we are considering. We also have tabs on a number of other players as well. But if you feel like we are missing someone, politely go ahead and suggest somebody just in case that we don't have them. And we will make sure to apply. And you could do that at Playmaker's Corner on our social media. So definitely a lot of players in consideration there. Eventually we will send out a finalist list of 4. And then you, the fans, will get a vote. Yes, that is true. You will get to vote here and be one of our votes. So whoever wins the majority of the fan vote actually wins a vote for a award. And so that is something to also keep in mind. I will say we are waiting on some schools here to send us some stats as well. And so we will add a couple more players as those come in here when we eventually post that graphic. So there you go. Now let's go ahead and look at the other awards we have going on, starting with Breakout Player of the Year. This goes to a player that is not a freshman, but is breaking out and having a great season and has taken their game to the next level here. And so just to list them off here, we have Dakota Moberg of Kaiser, Lillian Stevenson of Emmanuel, Natalia Hernandez de Leon of Lise McRae, O'Mariah Gordon of Warner, Marion Terrero Abrego of Warner, Kalia Gator of Weber, Riley Bolser of Weber, Kyla Rome of Huntington, and Tramisha Harris of Kaiser. So there you go. Those are your Breakout Player of the Year candidates. As of right now, we'll see if we could add on more or what it comes down to in the end here. Now, Newcomer of the Year, there's a lot of great freshman players, but we tried to kind of be picky and narrow it down to these players that we are considering here and may even add more. But for now, these are the players that are the front runners. Avalon Lux-Offerman of Warner, Ava Wallace of Kaiser, Sawyer Rigdon of Barton College, Amaya Pablo of Lindsey Wilson, Anna Anderson of Ottawa, Luzariana Herrera of Weber, Gianna Brown of Emmanuel, Anahi Morales of Hope, Lily Rumru of Milligan, Annabella Rhodes of Milligan, Holiness Mara Hodges of Midland, Gianna Reyes of St. Francis, Haley Witherspoon of St. Francis, Harmony Walker of St. Francis, Madison Woodard of Cumberland, Marley Hyde of Cumberland, Kaylee Phillips of Nevada State, Molly Shellpepper of Eastern, Parker Bridges of Milligan, Kennedy Young of Huntington, Valerie Angebada of Barden, Tamaya Carter of Huntington, Janelle Francis of Wingate, Shalimar St. Just of Huntington, Alyssa Ramos of King, Shania Spencer of Daytona State, and Lydiana Da Silvia of Daytona State. Now, for Defensive Player of the Year here, these are the players we are considering. Valerie Angebada of Barden, Yvonne Brussel of Wingate, Parker Bridges of Milligan, DJ Paris of Ottawa, Riley Bolser of Weber, Molly Shellpepper of Eastern, Marion Torrero Abrego of Warner, Kenzie Fillion of Point, Anna Vincenzini of Warner, Lauren Clark of Warner, Jukani Washington of Ottawa, Jessica Finley of Warner, and Tamaya Carter of Huntington. Now, Offensive Playmaker of the Year, we are considering Catherine Hutchinson of Warner, Avalon Lux-Offerman of Warner, Jessica Finley of Warner, Tara Lorente of Baker, Ava Wallace of Kaiser, Sawyer Rigdon of Barton College, Kaylee Phillips of Nevada State, Krista Quinn of Milligan, Bridget Kaiser of Milligan, Ashley Clam of Kaiser, Marley Hyde of Cumberland, Shahiro Awada of Kansas Wesleyan, Anna Anderson of Ottawa, and Janelle Francis of Wingate. And then for MVP here, we are considering Catherine Hutchinson of Warner, Ava Wallace of Kaiser, Bridget Kaiser of Milligan, Yvonne Brusso of Wingate, Jessica Finley of Warner, Valerie Bada of Barden, Kaylee Phillips of Nevada State, and then last but not least, Ashley Clam of Kaiser. So there you go. A lot of football still to be played here. We will be posting a graphic here soon on our social media at Playmaker's Corner, so make sure you follow us there so you could check that out whenever that drops here. Like I said, we are combing through all the stats. We are requesting stats from schools, and honestly, most schools this year have done a really good job of posting their stats, so shout out all of them. We really appreciate that. It helps us bring a light to your players and whatnot, and get to talk about them. So we will be requesting stats as we go. If you are a program that hasn't posted stats publicly, feel free to send those over to us, and we will keep those in consideration and consider players for these awards. Because here soon, it's not, I'm just going to tell you how the end of the year award process will go. Myself, Cody, and Gina, we each have a vote. Probably women's college flag football will have a vote as well. They've been voting or ranking in our polls as well for our top 25 teams. And then we will probably have a couple other guest voters, usually some that have voted in the past here from the flag football world that are pretty prominent. So that way we could even out the bias, if we're just being honest there. So there you go. But myself, Cody, and Gina will pick the final 4 finalists, and we will make sure to post the finalist list near the end of the season. So there you go there. Those are our end of the year award races. Alrighty, thank you so much for rocking with us. We appreciate you a whole bunch here. Next week, we have a big episode. Per usual, as things continue to heat up, rankings and recognitions will be on Thursday, recaps on Tuesdays. Make sure you follow us at Playmaker's Corner to check all of that out on our social media and know when that falls. And then check out our website at playmakerscorner.com. Just talked about all of our great award winners here. If you want to see the award winners from the past couple years, go ahead and check that out. Like I said, this year is the first year that we are considering players from any division or level here. But the past couple years, we've done it exclusively on the NAI level, which we really feel like has been the best level of women's college flag football for the last couple years. And I would say still even this year, if you look at the top 25 teams. But, there are other programs coming up here. I know the Big 12 just announced that they will be looking to support women's college flag football as a varsity sport, which is huge. Shout out CU Boulder, the University of Colorado, hopefully looking to get something going there. I know they have a club team, shout out Kendall Finley, and so that'll be really exciting to follow as we continue to cover women's college flag football this year and into the future, and that'll be a great deal when we get to cover D1 football as well. But until then, thank you for rocking with us, and we will catch you later.